We are on the cusp of a major social change. Do you feel it? Even if you don't, make no mistake, change is coming, and it is going to be unforgettable. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Hart, and here on Prime Spark, where we work with and on behalf of women over 55, I want to help you find that spark that will ignite your way forward, reflect your gifts to the world, and illuminate your path through this next stage of life. Through these podcast conversations, I hope to inspire you to see how you can make a significant contribution to some of the gnarly problems that are facing us right now. Join me, and together let's discover our Prime Spark. Hi, and welcome to Prime Spark. I'm Sarah Hart, and I'm so happy you're here with us. Prime Spark is designed for women over 50 or close, with a goal to help us all live our happiest, most fulfilling and productive lives, now and in the future. The mission of Prime Spark is to change the way our society sees and treats older women. That's a big mission, which only means we all need to be involved and we need to get going now. And today I have the pleasure of talking with Kim Korte, a woman whose work I admire. Kim Korte hosts the Flavors of Emotions podcast and is the author of Yucky Yummy Savory Sweet, Understanding the Flavors of Emotions. In this groundbreaking work, she shares a process to help us make sense of our feelings through the lens of a chef understanding flavors in a recipe. This unique approach to emotion management blends culinary metaphors with emotional education in a digestible format, making the complex world of feelings accessible and actionable. As a sensory perception and emotion management strategist, she aims to help people develop creative action around how they experience the world and their emotions. Welcome, Kim. I'm so happy you're here today.
Well, thank you, Sarah. I'm so excited to be with you.
So, in getting started, let me just ask you, do you experience getting older? If so, what is that experience? And if not, why do you think it is that you don't?
I do experience getting older and in all kinds of ways. The changes in the body, definitely. The changes in how I look, but also the changes as to who I am inside. And I'm so excited about that because I am very actionable in understanding who I am, noticing like how I feel and how it impacts what I do. And when I say what I do, not even with other people, but how I interact with my friends and my family. So I'm I'm excited because I feel age does bring wisdom if we are keen to bring it in.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we can't just sit and get older and think we'll get wiser.
Right.
It's like sometimes I have people say, Sarah, you shouldn't talk about older women. You should talk about mature women. And I say, well, I know some older women who aren't mature and some younger women who are very mature. So that doesn't work for me. So, how did
Yeah.
you get started in this, Kim? This is so unique.
Pain. I mean, I think we've all experienced that, but it was a very painful divorce. And my background is in accounting. I'm very process and procedures oriented in that I have a consulting business and I go in and I say, let me help you organize this in such a way. I implement this procure to pay system, and I'm not going to bore you with all of that. But it is a part of it is designing workflow and creating procedures so that, they can streamline their processes. And also everybody knows what everyone should be doing. And after this painful divorce, where I lost a husband, a friend, and two businesses, it was devastating. And literally, I was on the floor of my condo packing it up to move from San Diego back to where I was from, the San Francisco Bay Area. And I was specifically moving to San Francisco. And I was thinking, how did I get here? Like, why did this happen? And I knew that my thoughts were a part of it and my emotions. And it just really took me on this journey. And I think it's truly my soul's journey to understand feelings. And now I know it's my soul's journey to help other people doing this. And so in this process, I read this book called How Emotions Are Made: The Secret Life of the Brain. And of course, me, brain made process, I love it. And so I read it. And then I read it again. And then I read it again because there was a lot of neuroscience in this word, interoception. And I knew that interoception was important. So then I said, okay, how does that work? Because I'm always, I'm a curious kitty. How does that work? And I realized that not enough people understand how emotions are made and what interoception is and why it's so critical to emotion management. And I'll stop for a question because I could just go on and on and on.
One of the things I want to ask you is, what does that word mean?
Interoception is a sensory system, just like hearing, seeing, they have the technical term for it, vision and taste and all that. And that is how we feel inside of our bodies. Interoception is literally a sensory system that tells us how we feel. And just like our vision, we might not be paying attention to what we're seeing. We just take it in. We could not be paying attention to how we feel. And more importantly, we may have been taught to push down to not pay attention to how we feel. And so understanding that it's probably one of the most important communication tools that our body has to us to tell us what's important, what's not important, which direction to go in, which direction probably we don't like. It's the tool that we can use to craft our own personal value statement. And we might not be connected to it. And so that's really what part of my main mission is to help people understand it, to get comfortable with it, and then learn how to have that internal dialogue and not be afraid of it.
So say that word again.
Interoception. So think of interior and ception. So we have
interior reception,
interior reception. Let's just
interior
say that.
reception.
And then we have exteroception, which is all of the sensory systems that give us information about the outside world. So it's how we gather in outside world information. So what we see, what we smell, what we hear, it's all coming with throughout the body,
right?
From outside in. And then with interoception, it's all the information that goes to the brain from inside of our body. But it's a two-way communication, right? It's coming in and we receive it, but we also are sending information to the brain as to what we're feeling. So it's refining it.
That's really interesting because, I mean, like a lot of our listeners right now, I've done so much stuff. I mean, workshops and listened to tapes and books and on and on. And I never heard that word before. And I never thought about the way you're describing that. I mean, I think a lot of us think that our emotions just happen,
right?
They just are, and they are there for a while and then they go away.
Mm-hmm. No, there's a creation process to it. And that's what I want people to understand is it's a product much like a recipe. First, before I go down that road, I want to explain one other thing about this fabulous sensory system is that it comes in what I call two flavors. There's the feelings that we get that tell us that we're hot or we're cold or we need to use the restroom or we need to go to sleep. these are all feelings. And it's that same sensory system that also tells us that we're sad or that we're happy. It's the signals that we get. But the thing is that we interpret those signals, and our brain uses our past experiences to help to do that, to make that deciphering of, okay, what do these signals mean so that it can take action? Because the brain wants to know what everything means. Just like when we see, we think we are seeing with our eyes, we think we're hearing with our ears, but no, it's actually happening in the brain. It was discovered, I think, like 1,000 years ago. There was a Muslim scientist who discovered they used to think that light emanated from the eyes. And then he said, no, it comes into the eyes. Our brain makes sense of it based on what it's learned. Babies can't see, right? But all of a sudden, all this light is coming in and it learns to make sense of it in various ways. And so that information is stored in our brain. Same with what we hear. All these sounds might not make sense. And then we learn, oh, that's a horn. We learn that this is what this word is and what it means. And so that gets stored in our brain. The same is true of feelings. And so sometimes we can't distinguish the difference between a, a feeling, if we're sad or if we're sick, if we're angry or if we've, got an upset stomach, because our body uses the same parts of our body to experience them. So this is what part of what I try to do. So if we think about what happens is at every given moment, your brain is receiving all this information about the world outside of us, right? And like I said, it happens in our brain. It's not in our eyes or ears or mouth or whatever, or our hands, our skin, touch, whatever. It is happening outside. The brain interprets it.
So, how we interpret something that's happening in our body could be an interpretation we learned as a child, and it might not
Absolutely.
be relevant anymore. It might not be accurate. Is that possible?
Absolutely. They're called prediction errors. And let me just go down this path for a second and then and see if this answers your question. So we get this information in, and your brain makes a split-second prediction. And I'm using that word as a not in real time experience. So it makes a prediction very fast. It's very efficient, this beautiful brain of ours. And it makes this prediction and it says, boom, this is your experience, because it's using past experience to do this. So let's say that you're out and about and you see Susie, and your brain predicts Susie based on what it's seen. And then you look again and it's not Susie, it's someone else. But what if Susie was with a man and it wasn't her husband? And you think, oh man, Susie's got, some strange man's arm around her. And you never took that second look. You would think Susie's cheating on her husband, potentially, right? But when you take that second look and your brain adjusts, it goes, oh, I made a prediction error. That's not Susie. It's just someone who looks very similar to Susie. So that's the thing with our brain. It can make a prediction and it can get it wrong, but also we can have experiences with what we see, hear, smell, whatever it is, and then redefine that experience so that we don't have it in the same way. So literally, we have a model of the world inside of us. Because I don't know when you see me how I see me. I don't know when you see a color red that you experience it the same way that I do. It's because it's all in our head and how our brain got the information initially and labeled it.
So sometimes I have thought of perception, how we perceive something and why we perceive things so differently, as like a window screen. And it depends on what little box we're looking through. And so what you're saying somehow feels a little similar to me than that. I don't know if it is, but it feels a little bit.
It is very similar because your brain takes in 11 million bits of information, I think, every second. and we can only get 40 to 60. So it has to prioritize that information, right? So it has to prioritize that information. And part of how it prioritizes that information is past experience. What does it need to focus on? So this is where I come in with my food analogies. And that is that all of this information coming in to the brain are like ingredients. If you've ever seen that TV show Chopped, where they get a basket full of food and that's kind of crazy that they have to use because they're told, that's important. And then they have other food around them that they can use, and yet they all create something different. Well, the same happens for us. We create our own emotion recipe based on all of this incoming data, how it's been focused, like what's a priority that the brain thinks we've given it. And then it produces an emotion that we experience. And that could be anything, really. But the point is, it's our brain who's creating it. And we have the power to tell our brain, no, this isn't what we want to cook up. This isn't what we want to experience. That may have worked before, and it doesn't work for us now, which is something you were alluding to earlier. And I think that's what I'm really trying to do is bring a level of consciousness, because we taste that food when it comes into our emotional palate, right? Like that emotion that gets produced is like us tasting that event. And how many times have you eaten a meal and never tasted it? And we do the same thing with our emotions. So what I'm trying to help people do is get familiar with their emotional palate, change up their recipes, and start to look at these experiences as just that, ingredients. What did I miss? Was there something else that was going on in this experience that might change what I produced in the way of emotion? There's so much that we have in the way of power over how we feel that we don't even realize.
So let's take an example. Tell me an example of a client you've worked with who, and you've used the food and recipe analogy to work with them with some specific thing.
Okay, so let's just say at work, right? Someone did something and it really upset them. And so I said, so what was the emotion that was produced? And what is behind that emotion? Like, what do you think is kind of driving it? And often it's fear. And so when you look at that fear of looking bad or not knowing enough, a lot of us have these insecurities that really drive a lot of our emotional experiences. So then we say, okay, so let's look at this, everything that was happening. So what were you focused on? And oh, they did this and this and this. I go, but what else was transpiring? Oh, they needed this information. Oh, they needed it for this. Well, who was asking for that? And oh, well, they were asking it for this reason. I said, so really, you were feeling angry that they needed it, but really all they were looking for was to support a project that they're working on, and they really don't have a say in it. And so they're like, oh, okay. So in that moment, they were able to examine what was going on beyond their initial response, and then able to see it with more ingredients that made a change in their emotion. And you might think that, like, well, who doesn't do that? Of course we can do that. But a lot of people think of it and take their emotions so personally that when you look at it as ingredients, like what ingredients were you missing in that situation? Would it change it? And it can. And if you always look at it from a more what is driving me and my focus, which a lot of times, like I said, is fear, and getting more curious about what's going on in the situation that might change how you feel. It gives you that opportunity to change that recipe, but it also is giving you the practice of being more consciously involved, of tasting your emotions, not just consuming them without even noticing the flavors.
Okay, so I understand sort of taking that reaction of fear, taking it apart. I still don't understand how the metaphor of taste and recipes and so forth. I don't understand how that helps. I mean, you could explain that whole thing without saying anything about food.
Yes, but I use food just to say, okay, well, what was the ingredients of that situation?
So it makes it more understandable, more fun for the
And
client.
less personal,
Say again.
like, and less personal. So we're taking the ego out of it. When you're looking at a situation and seeing it as ingredients, rather, it's like a recipe, like you're thinking, oh, okay, you're using a more abstract approach to it, not a personal aspect of an emotional response,
So
how
are there
personal we
some
take things.
Yeah. So are there some people with whom you've worked who react better or more successfully with the metaphor, or does everybody react successfully to the metaphor?
Well, I think so far I would say it just makes it more enlightening and, like I said, less personalized. In fact, one of the readers of my book made a comment about how now he sees things differently, because it's not just the recipes or the ingredients that we take in. It's what ingredients are we putting out there, and how are people receiving them. And it shone a light for his conscious awareness of what he's saying, and making sure that they understand the recipe he's trying to deliver. So it's a whole new way of looking at emotions in the construction of them, and the fact that we construct them and someone else does, not as what you just said, they just happen to
Right.
me.
Right.
And so when you're looking at it in the aspect of these, what ingredients were coming in, it's to depersonalize it, but it's also to make you more consciously aware of how it tastes, and taking another bite of a situation. Meaning, did I taste what I just think I tasted? And I'll give you an example of, something you would think is so benign, but it's relatable to even how we feel. In my book, I use this example of this man. He went to a party. I was at this party, and he took a sip of some wine that poured it out of this very expensive bottle of Opus One Cab. He drank some down, and he's like, "Oh, I love this wine." And his friend, the host, started laughing. He's like, "Oh, really?" And he's like, "Yeah." And then he took a second sip, and he's like, "Wait, this is an Opus One." And that second sip was right. His friend had put Two Buck Chuck, the $2 Trader Joe's brand, in the bottle because he was late and we had already scarfed down the Opus One. And so my point to this is that our brain is a prediction machine. And his brain predicted Opus One based on his experiences. So understanding that your brain is predicting everything you experience, including your emotions, and then in combination, using that whole concept of of flavors. What did I just taste emotionally in this situation? To, like I said, destigmatize emotions, realize that it's a construction, like a chef. What did my chef just create? And how can I maybe change that recipe by, or change that flavor that I just tasted by looking at what other ingredients were in there? Because a second taste can maybe produce something different.
So I could imagine that there are people who want to know more about this. And I'm wondering if people read your book, Yucky, Yummy, Savory, Sweet, Understanding the Flavors of Emotions, can they get started on this on their own? Or,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, it seems like it would be fun to try.
It's a methodical book. I take people through because I want them to understand how the brain constructs, what our sensory system is. I didn't, I don't think I truly understood it. And then how we create recipes. Like I call us emotion chefs, and I even go down the list. There's exercises of levels of emotion chef, just like you have levels in a kitchen, how to get more connected to our feelings, because just like any other skill, and I'm going to say connecting to our emotions is a skill. Some of us are born able to taste food and capture all these different flavors, and some of us aren't. And so it's in this book is how to connect more, like actions that we can take, things that we can do to get more comfortable with feeling our feelings and noticing them so that you can be more connected. So it's not just tasting them, it's understanding like the different nuances of it. So if you start to work on that in simple ways, like if you're really, really afraid of your feelings, you start just connecting to flavors of food or noticing smells or, enhancing that sensory system, then you're more comfortable to get to enhance your new interoceptive system you just got introduced to.
So I'm thinking of this specific podcast is Prime Spark. And is there anything in particular that applies to women over 50, or are emotions, period?
I think it applies to people of all ages, but especially to women in their 40s and 50s. And I started this journey in my 40s, and I say it came really alive in my 50s. And the change that I have in my relationships, in my understanding of myself, we are born to learn. If you think about it, from the moment we're a child, this little tiny infant that gets comes into the world, our main job is to learn. And I think we're here to learn about ourselves, and how we learn about ourselves is through experiences. And maybe we've built up so many experiences that are making us not enjoy our life as much as we want in our 50s. And so when we can recraft, create new experiences or what I call recipes and be a part of it, it can change us at any age. But at a time when a lot of women have subjugated their feelings, who have sacrificed how they feel because they've been raising families or taking care of things or trying to succeed and or do all these things that weren't always for themselves. This to me is one of my greatest gifts that I've given myself later in life. I'm 62 now, and I intend on creating these experiences, refining who I am as a person till the day I die.
I love it, Kim. Thank you. So, if people want to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to do that?
You can go to kimkorte.com, and I have links to my book. You can learn about me. I'm on mostly on Instagram and LinkedIn. And I have the podcast that you can learn. My book actually is on my podcast site. If you just want to listen to it for free, that is fabulous. Feel free to. Um, and if you want to do some coursework, I'm working on a course to kind of simplify it and take you through it more speedily. So like if you read the book and you're like, oh, this was a lot, and you want just some of the direct points, I'm going to be offering a course. It should be out hopefully February, March. And you can do it online, and I do workshops for organizations.
Great. Thank you. This has been absolutely fascinating. I've never thought about most of everything you've just said. So we're at the end of our time, but I just want to reiterate that Kim's podcast is Flavors of Emotions. So if you're interested and want to listen more to Kim, then go to the podcast. Her book is Yucky Yummy Savory Sweet, Understanding the Flavors of Emotions. So that is our time today. Please join us again. You can find our Prime Spark podcast on every popular outlet. Find out more about Prime Spark at primesparkwomen.com. Thank you so much again to my guest, Kim Korte. And don't forget, you can find her at Kim Korte, KIMKORTE.com. Thank you, Kim. Thank you.
No, thank you. This was such a pleasure. I appreciate you.
And thank everybody for being with us. Spread tolerance and love. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode and would like to stay updated, you can head over to my website, primesparkwomen.com, and get my free Spark Guide, 7 Questions to Ignite Your Spark, to help you discover your own spark. See you in the next episode.